Folks at home, welcome back to the Crimson Oak Pond, and unfortunately today, we're having to say goodbye to the backyard pond. This is where our pond building journey began back in 2018, and we have a bunch of good memories here, and it's also home to the most aggressive bass in the world, named Moby, so he's going to be moving to a new pond today. But it's not all bad news. Our new backyard also has a pond that we'll be giving you a tour of later in the video. And a lot of you guys that started following the channel during the 5-acre pond build haven't seen much of this backyard pond, but for a few years it was the primary focus of the channel, and we filmed about 90% of the content right here in the backyard. And it all got started back in 2018 when we needed to build a bigger body of water for our two pet bass, Bonnie and Clyde. And that was also the first time I met Greg and Ed with Aquascape, and they brought in a small group of talented guys, and we completed this backyard pond start to finish in 2 days. But this build also taught me a lot about ponds, and how aquatic vegetation and aeration, and even the nutrients in the water all work together forming a natural ecosystem. But after 2 long days of work, we began putting the finishing touches on the pond, and the celebrations began after a successful pond build. And for the next few years, our two pet bass, Bonnie and Clyde, lived a happy life in the backyard pond. And we also did several projects there, like building an inverted aquarium so the fish could swim up above the pond's water level and see into the backyard. We also rescued and hatched 5 turtle eggs that we called the Ninja Turtles, and they also grew up in the backyard pond, as well as some massive bluegills and a big black crappie we call Outlaw. So all the remaining fish are going to get moved to the farm today, including the most aggressive of all, Moby. And Moby was born deep in a swamp in South Alabama, and we caught him when he was probably just a couple of months old. And the main thing that stood out with Moby was his appetite. No matter how much we fed him, he was always hungry, and even willing to go airborne for his next meal. We even had times where he jumped completely out of his aquarium, fell to the floor, but when we put him back in, he'd go right back to eating. So his aggression and appetite was unmatched. And I also remember the day we moved him into the 300-gallon aquarium, and the first thing he did is eat all the bait fish in there, and then swam over to the massive bluegill we call Sheriff, and challenged him. So as you can see, Moby is no ordinary fish, and has been one of the fan favorites for years now. And after we built the 5-acre pond, we moved Bonnie and Clyde there, and moved Moby into the backyard pond, and that's where he's lived out his days up until now. And I asked you all in the last video where you thought we should move Moby, either to the 5-acre pond or Cedar Falls, and Cedar Falls won by a long shot. So today is Moby's big moving day, and we're back here at the backyard pond taking one last look at this beautiful waterfall feature. It looks more natural now than ever with all the mosses, ferns, and green growth that's come in over time. And as you can imagine, moving fish from one body of water to another is not always easy. But I've got 2 nets here because I've got Moby in the deeper part of the pond, which will make it easier to catch him because in the shallow parts of the pond, we have the fish cave that we called Clyde's Cove. That's where the other fish are hiding out right now. But this is going to be his transportation to the new pond, a 50-gallon holding tank with plenty of aeration. I've got it wired directly to a 120-volt outlet in the truck, so we should be good to go. And with the help of a really big net, catching Moby was a little easier than I thought it was going to be. But the one thing that was obvious right away when I grabbed him is the power and strength he had. It's also amazing to see how dark these fish get by living in shallow water ponds throughout the year. Alright Moby, time to take a little road trip. And once I saw Moby's power, the last thing I did was duct tape the lid down to make sure he didn't jump out riding down the highway. We also activated the camera that faced the truck bed just to make sure we didn't have any leaks. And we made it to Cedar Falls. The trip went perfect. Moby seems to be doing good. Alright Moby, time to head over to your new home. So I was going to weigh him, but since he's Moby and such an important fish, I didn't want to add any extra stress. But I've been looking at bass all my life, and I'd say somewhere between the 4 and 4.5 pound range. So I'm going to watch him throughout the day because one thing I really want to see is how he does with these other bass around. There was a point where he had one other small bass and catfish in his aquarium, but he was so aggressive and constantly tried to eat them that we had to isolate him. But once we put him in the backyard pond, there were other fish that were established in there already, like the big bluegills and black crappie, and he never had any issues with them, so I think we'll be good here. The one other thing I monitored was the water temp. I always like moving fish in the spring because the air temperature matches that water temperature somewhere in the low 70s, and by keeping that water temp the same from the backyard pond, through the trip, and into the new pond, it'll reduce that stress from moving him. And over the years, I found that moving fish from one aquascape style pond to another aquascape style pond is really easy because the water parameters are basically the same. I would have been a lot more concerned if we put him in the 5-acre pond, and now that we're in the springtime, it also has that plankton bloom, which you would want to slowly condition him to, not just drop him in there all at once. But the ultimate test to see if it's going to be a successful transition is to see if Moby starts eating. And it did not take long at all. Moby said, "Why do you guys leave all these snacks hanging around?" And he immediately started eating all the bait fish that swam in front of him. And this is just minutes after adding him. So although he may have been a little uncomfortable getting moved around, it wasn't enough to suppress that appetite. Got him. But while I was over here at the pond, look who else came out. We got the banded water snake that we call Jake the Snake. And I don't know if you guys can see it, but Jake has gotten much bigger since last year. I think he's had a pretty heavy dose of the golden shiners. And there's a chance that Moby's seen a snake in the backyard pond. But Jake the Snake has definitely captured his attention. Moby's giving him the stare down, and it almost seems like he's sizing him up to see if he can eat him. But man, Jake has gotten so big, there's no way that Moby could eat him. So hopefully the two will go their separate ways. Alright, so now I'm going to give you guys a quick tour of the new backyard pond. As much as we didn't want to leave the old house, it does help that this house has a pond because you know how much we love them. But there was one thing that stood out right away, and that's that this pond is home to an abundance of wildlife. We got some very interesting looking ducks here. Not sure what species they are. We also got Mr. Longneck. Not surprised to see him here. And I think we have to name this one Turtle Point. That's where they all climb up on the bank to sunbathe. And we didn't move very far from our old home, but after Oliver came along, we simply ran out of space at the old house. So it was time to move on. But we're also pretty excited about the new opportunities. I'm very interested to see what lives in this pond. The kids decided to try to feed the fish by throwing some goldfish in, and we did see some nice healthy bluegills come up, and even a few small bass. But the most interesting guy in here so far was this big snapping turtle. Man, look at the neck on that guy. So we'll take a more in-depth look at the pond in the next video. But right now, Sarah said it's been a long day, and it's time to roast some marshmallows. But now let's head back out to the farm, and nothing makes me happier than seeing the fish truck show up. We got the guys from Southeastern Pond today, bringing a load of giant, adult-sized golden shiners. And we are going to be in for a treat today, because we've only done this one other time, and that was this past fall. And these adult golden shiners got by far the biggest reaction compared to any other bait fish that we've added into the pond. So we should be seeing some fireworks here in just a minute. But this was a first for me. These shiners are so big they actually clogged up the hose when we were dumping them in. But the one thing you'll notice about shiners is how quickly they adapt to a new body of water and get right back to 100%. When you put thread fins and some other bait fish in a pond, a small temperature change can shock them, and they'll sit there stunned for a while, and it'll take them a few minutes to get their bearings. But with the shiners, they are full speed right out of the gate and can get to the other side of the pond in no time. So my biggest challenge is always figuring out which way to point the cameras to capture some of those big blow-ups, because it's happening all across the pond at once. So today I actually set a few GoPros out around the bank to help capture some of those strikes. But the biggest reason we get such a reaction from the tiger bass when we stock these is because everything about this size bait is the exact preference of a 3 to 5 pound bass. A largemouth bass always prefers long and skinny baits compared to thick and chunky. And that's why a plastic worm is one of the best fishing lures, because it has that long, slender profile. And also, now that the bass have gotten bigger, and I'd say that the majority are in that 3 to 4 pound range, they're looking for a bigger target, and so if a small 2 to 3 inch thread fin swam a couple feet away from them, it may not be worth their energy swimming over there to eat it. But when they see this big 6 or 7 inch, slender profiled snack swim right by them, they can't resist. And then when you add that extra element of the shiners being 100% and very capable swimmers, as well as being able to jump pretty high out of the water, that's the perfect ingredients for some good entertainment. And as I track these bass through the database, there's been 2 times that I've noticed an immediate spike in all the weights of the fish. And the first was after we added the prawns, and the second was last fall on our first delivery of these golden shiners. So we'll catch some in about a week, and I expect to see some good growth. But the bass aren't the only things interested in the golden shiners. Ever since we put them in, the eagles have been chasing them non-stop. It's something about that big profile, and also the fact that they love that grassy, shallow water, which is a perfect ambush point for the eagle, because they're not as good at diving and catching fish as an osprey, but when they've got bait in ankle-deep water, that's going to be prime hunting grounds. And there's a good shot of the sun going down, as the eagle's been working hard all day chasing bait. So a couple months ago, we installed sod around our new shop, and after that cold winter, it was struggling. And we gave it a little kickstart with one of our long-term partners, Sunday, and you could clearly see the results after each application, and we revived that sod out of the dormant stage into this nice green, healthy lawn. And if you're not familiar with Sunday, they're a subscription service that uses soil, climate, and satellite data to build a custom plan for your lawn. And you start out by taking a soil sample of your yard and send that off to their experts, and based on your soil and climate, they'll send you back the exact mix you need in these pouches to make sure your yard is looking great throughout the year. And the fertilizer application is extremely simple. I like using the water hose attachment. You screw that into the top of the pouch, connect the water hose, and then just give it a nice even application across the lawn until the pouch is gone. But they have a big variety of products, including things like this mosquito Deleto, which I think we all need down here in the South, as well as another product I just got done applying, the Weed and Green, which will prevent those weeds from germinating, as well as the Sunbelt High Nitrogen Pouch, designed for those warm season grasses. So Sunday takes all the guesswork out of it and makes it extremely easy to use with these pouches that connect to the water hose. So do me a favor and head over to getsunday.com/BamaBass and use promo code BamaBass30 to get 30% off your custom lawn plan. But the shiners aren't the only new additions to the pond. The toads have been hard at it, and we got a bunch of tadpoles here hiding in the grass, probably feeding on some of that algae. But here's something else that I find interesting. You only see this about once a year, and if you walk down the water's edge, you'll see that the bank is lined with snails. And so far, I don't think that the snails have caused any harm, but I have read online where they could cause issues for fish. So the best thing to get rid of these is adding a big load of shell cracker, because they love eating snails. Alright, let's head back over to Cedar Falls. And we have been in a drought for about 45 days now, and this is the first time in over a year that I've had to add water. And it's also the time of year that algae starts growing on the bottom of the pond, and so we're going to be adding some tilapia in here next week, which should clear that right up. And even though it may not be great for the ponds, I do love the look of that algae growing right here in the waterfall. It adds such a contrast. And it looks like Jake the Snake has lured in a friend, because we've got a much smaller banded water snake, probably only about a third the size of him. And this little guy better be careful now that Moby's living in here. But I can tell when these fish start lurking and following me around the pond that they're ready to eat. So we're about to do a quick feeding session. And while we do that, I want to talk for just a second about the algae issues that people have during this time of year. So no matter what body of water you have, if you're a pond owner or fisherman, when you look at the water during this time of year, most of you will see that there's some form of algae growth. And a lot of these algae and different aquatic vegetation prefer a certain water temperature. And so some may not grow in the winter or summer months, but when those water temps are in the 60s and 70s, a lot of these algae thrive. And what they're doing is actually feeding off the nutrients in the pond. But there's a few different ways that you can get rid of it, or at least help control it. But it is different for different bodies of water. So one of the first things that we do is add tilapia, because a tilapia is completely different from a grass carp in that it prefers algae over vegetation. So if you have filamentous algae in a pond and you add tilapia, they're going to feast on it. So next week we'll be putting tilapia in the 5-acre pond and Cedar Falls. And the second thing we're going to do here at Cedar Falls later in this video is add some tropical lilies. So sometimes you can add the aquatic plants that you want to see, and they'll compete with the algae and utilize some of those nutrients in the water, which could help eliminate the algae altogether. But that's how one body of water can be different from another, because in the 5-acre pond, we specifically don't want to add any aquatic plants out of fear of them reproducing and getting out of control. So for that instance, we add a beneficial bacteria, which does the same thing, and it competes with algae for food and starves it out. But in our case, tilapia are the best option because they also breed so often, which provides an additional food source for the bass. So they clean the pond and feed the fish. So I was walking around the pond's edge to check in on some of the golden shiners, and they love hanging out in grass. And if any of them do survive long enough, that's where they'll spawn and reproduce, and they have to have the grass to do it. But you also see in this pocket they're starting to use some of those brush piles we put out as a little added protection from the bass. But the golden shiner is a schooling fish, and they're easy to spot because they like to get in that shallow water, and it looks like a big dark cloud moving around. As you can see, we got two different schools of them coming together right there and forming a bigger group. And this is probably the biggest school I've seen of them. but you'll notice they're all hanging out right there in the shallow water, doing their best to avoid those bass. And I don't blame them. Alright, if you missed our last video, we added these post-larva prawns to 4 different locations out here at the farm. And today I'm feeding the little guys that are over here in the holding tank, and I've never seen something so happy to see a protein pellet. But they grow really fast, and just a week later, they're already big and have enough mass to latch onto those protein pellets and actually drag them down. But the spring is a busy time of year for us. Today we're going to be doing our annual Seacon Crawfish Bowl and cooking for about 100 people. And I love these basket-style cookers. It makes the bowling process much easier. After they're cooked, you just flip the basket up and they slide right down into a cooler. But now that all the cooking's done, we are going to have a feast today. We've got a pile of steamed shrimp and 200 pounds of crawfish to eat. But hey, look who it is. That's our little buddy Foxy, hopping around out there in the fields. I don't see him as much as I used to, so I'm always happy when he comes around. He's a curious little guy and been with us since we started the 5-acre pond build. And something I didn't notice at first, but whenever I made a little sound to get his attention, I saw another fox squirrel run off in the background. So Foxy's found him a friend. Alright, now time for an update on the shop build. This week the guys are putting up another V-groove wall and have gotten a good start on that. And when they complete it, we're going to stain it the same color that we stained the interior wall, which will give it that nice dark look and match everything else. But the guys just finished up this section and got all the trim installed. It's coming along nicely. Now let's head on down to the swamp and check in on some of the wildlife. We got Mr. Raccoon putting through, and a big group of deer crossing the creek. Not sure if this time of year we'll be able to tell if they're a buck or a doe, but I think they're on to us. That one located the camera, but then had to return and diagnose the thread again. And I think we're clear now. Nope, she's back on to us again. But it is amazing how dark their fur and heads are this time of year due to the sun. But I guess she finally decided we're not a threat and went back to snacking on some limbs. But if you spend a day out here at the pond, there's a few times throughout the day you're guaranteed to get some action. And that's 9 o'clock in the morning, noon, and 4 o'clock in the afternoon when the bluegill feeders go off. And I love it because you see chaos from the bluegills, and then a few bass are going to capitalize on the chaos and usually knock a bluegill a few feet into the air. And then comes the aerial attack from the bald eagles, and then watch as this bass knocks a bluegill into the air. But when the bluegill lands, he knows what's down there, so he continues to skip out of the water until he's clear. And then we got this little bass that always jumps the gun, and really before the bluegills even get started eating, he goes in at 100 miles an hour and just stirs everything up. If I had to guess, his success rate is probably pretty low. But I will say life is pretty tough for a bluegill, because every time it's feeding time, you have to worry about what's beneath you and what's above you. And although the eagles aren't really good at catching them, they still have to be on the lookout. So I think we had a few unsuccessful attempts from the eagles today. So it's a good thing the shiners are hanging out in shallow water. One more shot from our bass that jumps the gun, and one more swing and a miss from the bald eagles. So if you guys recall, last year we had Greg the Pond Guy and Tom Holt come out and add tropical lilies to Cedar Falls, and that project turned out so good that we had to get Tom back out here to replant this year.
Hi Steve, how are you?
Doing good.
So this is why I brought you 12 lilies. This right here is the big Amazon. Look at that. Oh, wow. A little bit bigger than last year.
Yeah.
I got you 10 deep pots. Already has the fertilizer in it, and I got you some shallow pots for your upper area there too. This right here is Victoria Amazonica. This is an annual. It's grown from a seed every year. The seed was started in December, and this is one of the fastest growing seeds in the world. This plant can get up to 20 feet in diameter.
And this is the big lily that can also get so buoyant that it can support a human. So we may test it out with Oliver later this year.
I love tropical lilies. So if you wonder for your pond, do you want a hardy lily or do you want a tropical lily? A tropical lily will flower every day once the water gets to 70 degrees. Look at this here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Also, you can get the variegated leaves. If you want a night bloomer, night bloomers are only in the tropical lilies. The hardy lilies will have a smooth edge, but the tropical lilies will have a serrated edge like this.
So a big shout out to Tom. He drove these lilies in all the way from Orlando, Florida. And if you want to check out his nursery and see where he grows these, he's got his own YouTube channel called Holt Nurseries. So thanks a bunch, Tom. Alright, got the lilies added, and it's looking great now, but wait till you see it in a few weeks, because these lilies grow fast, and they are beautiful. And as you can tell, everything in a pond loves lilies because they provide that structure and cover to hang out around, as well as shade from the summer sun, and sometimes an extra little food source when a frog hops on them. But you can see we got a group of bass hanging out around them here, including Moby. And if you ever want to know for sure if it's Moby, he's got the black dot right on the left side of his head, almost the exact opposite of Spot, who's got the white dot on his head. Alright, now it's time to check in on the Squirrel House, and over the past few months, the mouse that we call Gus Gus has destroyed the house, and has been working all hours of the night building a nest. His paranoia also comes out at times. Since the cat showed up that day, he likes to check all the entrances and exits to make sure he's got a safe way to escape. And his anxiety kicks in during daylight hours, as he's always on high alert, watching out for the return of the cat. But now I see why Gus Gus was working so hard. He wanted to build a little home for his new family, and Gus Gus now has a couple Gus Juniors occupying the Squirrel House. If they keep this up, we may have to expand. But now here's something I need your help with. I have no idea what's going on out the front door of the Squirrel House right now. Now keep in mind this is about 15 feet high up in a tree, so whatever type of animal it is climbed up there, but I can't identify what it is. It's making some strange sounds. You guys let me know if you know what it is. So all the fields out here at the Crimson Oak Farm are green and lush right now, with the clovers and different grasses we planted last winter. And now it's time to cut and bale everything into hay. But it's much easier to see the full process from the sky. So we like to use all of the available resources out here at the farm to either benefit the wildlife, or in this case, benefit the local farmers, as all of this hay is going to be given to a cattle farm to feed the moo cows. And I don't know about you guys, but there's something so satisfying about watching some of this machinery work. I think I could just watch a time lapse of this stuff for hours. But as you all know, these crops have changed over the years. When we bought the farm, it was a peanut farm, and they would rotate through peanuts and cotton, and maybe occasionally some corn. And then here in the off-season in the winter months, we'll either plant a winter ryegrass or a mixture, and so it feeds the deer and other wildlife throughout the coldest part of the year, when all of their resources are low. And then whatever they don't end up eating gets cut and baled up and fed to the cows. So it's a perfect way to make good use of all the land. And I love watching the baler. Whenever he gets full, you gotta drop the bale out so he can go eat some more. But it was a fine day for baling hay. Like I mentioned, we've been in a drought for 45 days. But they were able to get everything cut and loaded right before this next storm blows through. So now let's check out the bird cam and see who's eating some seeds. And this is actually one of mine and Liz's favorite birds. They've got the orange feathers and they always sit on the pond's edge and make that beautiful call, which I believe is a mating ritual. But the bird cam also captured the eagle getting pestered and chased away by the crows. Then we got a little bluebird popping in for a snack. And I could be wrong, but I think I saw a bluebird fly out of this house. So I had to go check it out and see if there were any babies. And sure enough, we got a couple of baby birds in there. New additions to the farm. And a few weeks ago, we built Liz some planters. And we came in and added a bunch of topsoil and then a nice layer of mulch on top. And the next thing we did is give it a nice wooden stain. I think they turned out pretty good, so there's one thing left to do, and that's plant them. And Liz and her dad started a bunch of these from seed. And she's getting all the drip lines set, because I doubt they'd survive very long in this drought. But there we go, another project is complete. We've got a wide variety of plants and vegetables in there. Tomatoes, peppers, okra, you name it, she's got it. So we'll check back in a few weeks. So one benefit to having all the frog tadpoles is the kids get a lot of entertainment out of them.
And touch the frog.
Did he kick you? So every bass that we've caught in this pond, we have inserted a pit tag into it with this injector. So we're about to do a little fishing and scan the bass that we catch and see how big they've gotten and get their weights updated in the database. As you can see off in the background, we got a storm rolling through. So today we're going with top water only. Whopper plopper, buzz bait. I've been seeing bass chase bait up there on the bank. Should get some good action. Got him. Oh, good fish too. Oh man, always right at the bank. Putting up a fight. That's why you always use a trailer hook on the buzzbait, folks. Man, what a beauty. She's already spawned. Getting back thick again. Alright, this fish has been caught. 2233963. And she weighs 3.68 pounds. Man, that is a good looking fish. Nice belly. And this fish is named Ace, and he has gained over a pound in the last 8 months, which is a good growth rate. That's what we're shooting for. Little guy. Smaller, but thick. Alright, this fish has been caught, 570799. Weighing in at 2.44 pounds. And this fish is ukulele, and the 7th time we've caught it, and already the 3rd time we've caught it this year. So it lost a little weight around the spawn, and now is recovering nicely. Whoa. This fish has some strength. Man, I almost couldn't turn it around. It was heading right towards that structure. What we got here? Man, they're strong. All right, another one that's been caught, 2232853, weighing in at 2.55 pounds. And this fish is named Gil, and that's a good indicator that those golden shiners are doing their job, as this fish has almost gained a half a pound since the last time we caught it a month ago. The old subtle buzzbait's getting it done today. I like it because the main body rides up underwater and gives these fish something to bite and not having to fully commit to going up and exploding out of the water. There we go. Another 2-pounder. All right, this one's been caught, 569920. It weighs 2.11 pounds. And this fish is named Zip and is most likely a male bass, but it is the only fish that we've caught so far that has lost weight, which could be some underlying other factor that's not necessarily food related, but I will keep an eye on Zip and see if he recovers. Got him. Another good one. Alright, he's been caught, 570499, and weighs 2.20 pounds. And this fish is named Viking. It's been almost a year since we caught it, but it likes to hang out right there around the big feeder. Alright, now let's check in on the Halfacre Cam. I think that most of the bucks have dropped their antlers because I haven't really seen many coming through. It just looks like herds of does with the occasional raccoons mixed in. Wait for it. You can always see when it's coming. I love it when they stand up on those back 2 legs. I always see that as that's their message to me, to bring them some more food. But not a lot of action going on at the Halfacre today. Alright, I got one last sneak peek I want to show you guys. You're going to be seeing some action next week as Moby has gotten comfortable with his new home, as he's chasing the tilapia around. But we're going to end this video with our old backyard pond intro, because it's the last time we'll ever see it. But if you made it this far in the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can follow along with all the pond builds, aggressive bass, and wildlife out here at the Crimson Oak Farm. Hope you all enjoyed it, and we will see you all next time.